But now to pick up on some of Peter Dutton's observations in that interview. By the way, I don't understand Dutton's critics. It was clear in what you saw that he's on top of the issues and there's going to be no pushover. And in a world where our values and democratic institutions, freedom itself, are under siege, witness above all else freedom of speech, where people are frightened to say what they think, and if you disagree about climate change or vaccination or The Voice, you'll be vilified and demonised and cancelled. Someone's got to turn this ship of state around. Peter Dutton said he's not going to go over the cliff with Bowen on energy policy. Now, the public, thankfully, are not completely stupid. Kerry McDermott from Binalong, which is a village in the Southern Highlands of New South Wales, 37 kilometres from Yass, rightly says, and I quote, "It's fascinating watching the slow train wreck that is Europe, exacerbated, of course, by their lack of foresight in failing to diversify their energy supplies as they drift towards drastic energy shortages and sky-high prices. It's fascinating too," says the writer, "reading all the letters from readers who refuse to see that the principal problem is over-reliance on wind and solar generation," unquote. Well, it's obvious that people like Chris Bowen don't own a map, because in Europe, implementing a green agenda without anything to adequately replace fossil fuels is a recipe for energy poverty, and that's where we're heading, unless we continue to produce fossil fuels. Now, by all means, continue to seek to provide alternatives if you're so hung up about coal, but surely we're not going to repeat the policy failures, the energy poverty of Europe. And if carbon dioxide is the problem, it seems that places like China and India offer little support for these costly schemes and emissions targets, as Doug Hurst from the ACT writes, and I quote, "They would find China and India planning to burn increasing amounts of coal for decades to come." He writes, "Britain and most of the EU are turning back to coal and nuclear and delaying emission reduction targets, with similar change elsewhere and coal prices increasing by as much as 10 times last year to meet rapidly rising demand," unquote. And then touching on superannuation, which I'll come to in a moment, writes Doug Hurst, "Only a year ago, fund managers were calling coal mines stranded assets. Today, they're no doubt ruining their divestment of coal assets." Which brings us to the reference by Peter Dutton on superannuation. The first question should be asked is, why didn't we hear about any of this, fiddling with your super, before the last election? Yes, it's true that the incentives through the tax system given to superannuation are worth more than $200 billion a year, according to Treasury estimates, which is about 8% of the entire economy. And of course, Labor are now looking for money. And as Peter Dutton said, with the budget in chronic deficit, with an excess of spending, overtaxing of up to $50 billion, the Labor government is after money.